Kia ora koutou. As you know, we've made the decision around the next tranche of sanctions. There will be high interest in a number of aspects of this particular announcement because we are including 24 individuals that are associated with the recent decision of Putin around the annexation of area that Ukraine have been defending. Also 51 individuals, including Alexander Abramov, and also the inclusion of Evraz, which is an entity that Abramov is associated with. If I just cover off in particular how we're approaching sanctions in relation to Alexander Abramov, we're taking a tailored approach. The reason for that primarily has been early conversations and indications that I gave that we wanted to assess the New Zealand-based interests that Abramov has and the implication of sanctions that would impact on New Zealand interests. So that tailored approach very much takes into consideration the impact on New Zealanders. Also, in relation to Abramov has been the nature of the travel ban and the extent. So the travel ban that applies to Abramov will apply to his family members as well as aircraft and vessel carriage to New Zealand, and that will be prevented in the decisions that we've taken. Happy to answer any questions.
To make the decisions around Alexander Abramov in particular?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's primarily because we had to assess the extent of the New Zealand-based impact of decisions against Abramov. So this tailored approach does safeguard those interests where people are reliant for their own livelihoods here in New Zealand on some of the investments that Abramov has here, particularly based in New Zealand.
Is it with the decision to whether or not to expel Russian investment?
We continue to keep that as a live and active set of considerations, but it's not the most important decision that we would make. Also, you'll be aware that we have our own ambassador in Russia who's recently received accreditation, and is, we are mindful that of the high potential of reciprocal decision around the Russian ambassador here in New Zealand.
Apart from the economic sanctions, what's the impact? Is it basically that housing developments would tank if you froze business interests in New Zealand?
It would mean that committed investments in New Zealand, whichever New Zealand advantage, may well be impacted. It's not something that I would completely be able to discuss. There are a range of connections that Abramov have that have a New Zealand-based impact.
Is it like tens of people who lose their jobs, or is it wider?
It potentially could be wider than that.
Can you give us an indication of how wide it would be?
Hundreds.
Well, there are a number of business interests that Abramov has that has an impact on New Zealanders, their income, their livelihoods. So that's why we're taking a tailored approach. And it has been quite a bit of effort to try and get visibility over the full extent of the nature of those interests and the impact on New Zealanders. And that's why it's taken so long. So the prudent thing to do is to take a tailored approach, and the first step certainly is a travel ban. And as I say, that will extend to him and his family, and it will include aircraft and vessel carriage over land and sea. One at a time.
Did Australia's decision to impose sanctions on Abramov 3 weeks ago have any implication on your decision-making?
No, New Zealand made our decisions based on the fact that we have a far greater level of interest of Abramov's investments here in New Zealand, and that's the basis upon which we made our decisions.
How many family members are we talking about?
I can come back to you on the detail, but the extent of the cover of family members is something that I can confirm. We'll come to Gemma.
Does the impact or the potential impact on New Zealanders rule out any further sanctions on Abramov, or are you keeping it?
It's on the table. It's on the table. As I say, it's been really difficult to get full visibility over the impact of Abramov's investments here in New Zealand and the extent to which it impacts on New Zealanders' livelihoods, and that's why the most prudent thing that we believe we should do is take this first step. I'll come to Thomas and then I'll come here.
Do you have full visibility now?
No, we continue to gain visibility over the full extent of them.
There's some impact on New Zealanders. I mean, isn't the point of sanctions that you're building out
The point of
paying to individuals in Russia? You know, isn't
well, let me just clarify. The extent to which those investments impact on New Zealanders' livelihoods is something that I am concerned about. The extent to which Abramov's investments have a direct link to Russia. The fact that we've included Evraz in our sanctions is a clear signal that those offshore potential links are being covered off in the decisions that we're making.
Many countries across the world make sanctioning Russian officials and other aspects of the Russian economy at the moment at cost to themselves. Is New Zealand not willing to pay that cost?
No, we're making the same decisions where we know that there are direct links to Russia, but where there are domestic links that impact on New Zealanders' livelihoods, we're taking an approach that protects and safeguards some of those interests because, again, those are matters which I would be very concerned about. None of those domestic links here in New Zealand, as far as we can ascertain, mean that those people are sending money to Russia. They are not. Evraz is included because there is a link, a potential link to Russia, which we will not tolerate.
Why it was so difficult to establish his investments in New Zealand, and he made efforts to make it harder for officials to understand?
It's the nature of all the business transactions and the various links that Abramov may have and the business partnerships that he has that kind of make it really difficult to see through.
Have you received any sort of response from him, his lawyers? Do you expect to receive something?
Not as yet, but we do expect that he may well want to take legal action out against the decision that we've made.
And what's the advice that you've received on possible legal action?
Well, again, we're making our decisions based on our determinations, and a tailored approach means that we can send a very clear signal in relation to Abramov and his family about any offshore investments that have a consequence in relation to Russia in particular. But in relation to the New Zealand-based interests, again, it enables us to be mindful of the New Zealand-based livelihoods that will be impacted.
Challenge from him. Are you confident New Zealand is in a safe place to defend itself?
I couldn't absolutely say that for sure.
You've made the decision knowing that there could be a possibility, so what was the advice given to you around that?
I've made the decision based on two things. One, that the threshold in the legislation is met for us to be able to place travel bans and against Abramov and his family members, but also extend that to aircraft and vessels that might come to New Zealand as well.
You're within your rights to do what you're doing.
I've spent quite a bit of time to ensure that the legislative threshold is able to be met and am mindful that I have to be very clear around the range of interests and the domestic impacts on New Zealand livelihoods. And I am mindful that it's important that, you know, we New Zealanders don't have any connection whatsoever to Russia, that they're not inadvertently covered by the actions that I'm taking.
An idea of, or an insight into the extensive advice that you've received, and whether it's something new or something more that you've done in comparison to other individuals?
Well, we are mindful that the level of domestic investment that Abramov has here in New Zealand is more than what is in Australia.
If Abramov was standing here today, what would your message be?
That the actions that we're taking meet the threshold, the legislative threshold in the Russia Sanctions Act, which is an important threshold, but also that we've taken account of the domestic impact on New Zealanders' livelihoods. And really what we want to ensure is that the sanctions that we are applying to individuals and also entities are really to send a signal in line with other international partners that we will not tolerate the funding of Russia's effort and the illegal actions that they're taking in relation to the Ukraine.
President Joe Biden has talked about if Russia uses nuclear weapons, it could be like Armageddon. Do you agree?
I agree that no one wins. when nuclear weapons are being used, and you can guarantee that the international community will take swift action in that event.
How complete is your visibility over the domestic impact? So you're saying that you're not quite clear on the ties between him and Russia, but how complete or what percent do you have of the visibility, or what visibility do you have on the domestic impact?
Yeah, as best we can.
So you
As best we can.
You can't get any more visibility than you have
The
right
best
now.
visibility that we have in relation to the New Zealand-based interests.
What's the idea of how long you've been seeking advice on this? Is this something you've been working on since the Russian
Right from the introduction of the Russian sanctions bill.
When was the last time that he visited New Zealand?
Oh, look, I'm not sure about that. In fact, I could come back to you on detail, but he's not currently in New Zealand, and that's the information that I have.
Do you have personal contact with him?
No.
Just to clarify, when you talk about the scope, coming back to the question of kind of how many people are impacted here in New Zealand by Abramov's investments, what kind of scope are we talking? You said to Thomas before that was more than tens, but are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands?
Well, look, we're talking a number of people. We know, again, that there's the lodge up north. There are a number of investments. It's difficult to fully assess because of the nature of his business arrangements and partnerships that he has in New Zealand. Again, this has taken us a long time to get a level of visibility for me to take the step that I am taking with a level of confidence, but also preserving the interests of New Zealand livelihoods that are inevitably going to be impacted by Abramov's investments here in New
Surely you
Zealand.
must have an idea of how many livelihoods sort of roughly are impacted.
Roughly, and we can come back to you on the level of detail that we have to the degree that we have visibility.
Is there any way that you can force him or compel him to extract himself from New Zealand, like cause interest from New Zealand, to make a forcible sale or anything like that, as opposed to freezing it and damaging these people's livelihoods, like you say?
Look, the nature of the business interests are really, again, challenging to see through. What I want to do is ensure that we minimise the impact on New Zealand livelihoods who have no connection whatsoever to the war in Russia. This is about Abramov and his connection to the war in Russia, and again, Everest has been included, and we've made decisions to the best degree possible that we can see that connection.
Or considered in any way make the terms of business for him so difficult that he will remove himself and his interests from his...
Well, that may well be a consequence of this first step that we're taking.
Russia has again rained missiles down on civilians overnight. What is New Zealand?
We continue to share information with international partners around steps that they're taking, and we'll make our assessments accordingly. But we condemn and do not tolerate the recent actions of Russia. Putin continues to act like a bully.
A few weeks ago, the Defence Force said that there were possibly 2 reserve soldiers who might be in Ukraine and have recently travelled there. Have you been updated on whether or not there might be more New Zealanders?
Look, New Zealand's position regarding the advice around not travelling to Russia, that any individual who travels to Russia does that based on their own determination, but we are not supporting New Zealanders independently to travel to Russia.
Have you been updated on how long New Zealanders
It continues to be a matter that we rely on people who register on the Safe Travel Register, but our advisory hasn't changed. We're not saying to New Zealanders to go to Russia, to go to Ukraine and fight. It is dangerous there. We cannot guarantee anybody's safety.
Have you been updated on how many New Zealanders might be there from the Defence Force?
The Defence Force wouldn't necessarily know who is going to Russia for that particular purpose. The only way we have full knowledge is if people register on the Safe Travel Register. And then the rest of the reports are pretty much, well, potentially hearsay.
Is there any update on any efforts to retrieve body like the ambulance body? It's been treated as a cost of matter, isn't it?
It is, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And I was asked in the previous stand-up, does that mean that we may not retrieve his body? body, and there is a prospect that we may not be able to retrieve his body. And sadly, that is the situation we're in. We have a travel advisory that is saying to New Zealanders, don't go to Ukraine, it is dangerous.
Communication, is any aspect of the Russian system around it? I mean, there was speculation at the time that they may gain possession of his body and use it in some sense.
I don't have an update to the degree that they're using it in that particular way, but there is a high prospect, sadly, that we may not recover his body.
You've spoken about working on Mr. Abramov's sanctions right since the beginning of the introduction of the sanctions regime. Is this one of the most difficult sanctions to have made a decision about because of the complexity for you?
It is difficult because of the extent of the interests that Abramov has here, also to gain full visibility on the nature of his business interests. So it has taken us some time, and I admit that.
Can you just give some quick thoughts on the trade conference, the Māori trade conference that you were at today, the significance of the $70 billion Māori economy and the desire to have some Māori-led trade delegations into our overseas markets?
Yeah, well, I am really pleased that our government has seen fit to try and ensure that Māori participate in the trade discussions that we have been having. They've made really useful inputs into the UK and EU FTA, and that's seen itself manifest in a chapter and or opportunities for Māori to secure trade interests that are partly specifically unique for Māori, but also add to the New Zealand Inc. Trade interests. So we're being very progressive in that space, and we see that the more we can include Māori in our trade negotiations and add a point of difference, that advantages New Zealand Inc. And that's the conversation that we're having today in the forum.
Are we looking at sending any more aid to Ukraine, given the level of...
We continue to assess on a regular basis a range of areas that we can support. Sanctions have been an ongoing rolling contribution. We've made contributions in the humanitarian space, training, which was the most recent contribution that we made, and also to support the International Criminal Court of Justice.
Can you see an off-ramp for Putin?
Well, it's whether Putin can see an off-ramp, and we would hope that there is an off-ramp and that there would be a de-escalation, but he continues to act like a bully.
Do we have any Māori interests involved with Abramov?
Oh, look, that would be a granular question that again, it's been really difficult to see through all his business arrangements, but that's something that if I were to be asked right now, I don't have full visibility on the extent of his interests, and that's why it's been so challenging to take decisions that are based on really good information. But I'm confident on the decisions we have taken around the travel ban and also around the decisions around his family and vessels and marine vessels not coming to New Zealand, that is a good first step, and it's a tailored approach.
I understand why you've taken the time to not impact New Zealanders, but surely the travel ban was only ever going to impact him. Why could that not have been done at the beginning?
Again, we made the decision with the view in mind that we had to assess the extent of all his interests and what the impact would be, and I'm confident in the decision that we've taken.
Because you don't know the full extent of his investments in New Zealand, presumably that means you don't know the full impact that freezing his business assets would have.
Freezing his business impacts and the impact on New Zealanders is the concern that has been brought to my attention, which is why we've taken our time to think about how we approach the decision in relation to Abramov specifically. He has a number of business interests here in New Zealand that he doesn't have to the same degree, as I understand it, in places like Australia.
Is that the visibility of his interests, you think you have full visibility?
Yes, to a degree. Yes, to a degree. Look, we want to be confident in the decisions that we are taking.
Gina's question, if Abramov isn't even in New Zealand, then why did it take so long to introduce a travel ban? He's not here.
Look, we couldn't consider one thing without considering everything in relation to Abramov, and I think that's the most prudent approach that we should be taking.
But if
sorry to labour this point, but if you're leaving freezing his assets on the table, if you're leaving those other options on the table, then there's no reason why a travel ban couldn't have been
we're
introduced
making
earlier with
decisions.
that still left on the table.
Look, we're making decisions based on the New Zealand impact. In terms of the impact in relation to Russia and the link with Russia, we have included EVRAS within our sanctions approach.
Thank you.